Margaret, you mentioned I'd worked on your house in Martin, and I'm really not here to gather work from anyone. I was a high school teacher. I was a science teacher before doing this, and I taught Outward Bound for a while, taking kids out into the woods. But I've really liked working with my hands, and I've done that ever since I started working with Habitat for Humanity in college days. I used to build down in the Alamosa area, and I started with adobe houses, and then I started a company called Colorado Straw Bale Homes, and I built with straw bales for almost a decade. I built net zero, net positive houses 20 years ago in Boulder and Crestone and Breckenridge and Fort Collins. Did the first straw bale in Fort Collins. But I'm currently an energy contractor, and energy covers a lot. I mean, it's everything about energy, but it's not anything about aesthetics necessarily. I'm not the guy that does granite countertop, but I will recommend that you get a granite that's quarried in Colorado because of its low embodied energy, and they don't have to ship it over. So all things energy is kind of what I do. So I want this to be very informal. If you have questions at any time, please just interrupt. It's a small group. I'm going to go over kind of every option that we have, and I don't think there's one right solution. It really depends on your home. And I do have my opinions about what we should be doing and what we should be installing, but everyone's a little bit different, and everyone's budget's a little bit different. Everyone's house is a little bit different. So let's go through some of these and see if you can glean some ideas and what might work for you. So, sound good? Okay. So picture Golden. Jim's is right here. I live right down there. Martin lives right over here. Okay, so just two questions to start. What's the most efficient heating system out there? And what's the most efficient cooling system out there? Maybe it's a rhetorical question, but I will revisit this at the end because I do think it depends. So when we're talking about heating and cooling, we need to start talking about comfort. You can have a great heating source, but you can also have a great heating source that doesn't distribute the comfort well, or you can have a bad window, or you can even have a good window that just doesn't perform very well. You can have drafts. You can have all these things that will make you uncomfortable. And I think a lot of you probably have experienced this where you're in a house and it's a new system, or man, this is a new house, but I'm still not totally comfortable next to this window or in this area. What's that noise? I mean, it can be more than just I'm completely comfortable. So from a scientific perspective, we talk about mean radiant temperature. And mean radiant temperature is, in this example, we've got a hot stove, and you know what that feels like when it radiates towards you. But then we've got a 40-degree surface back here, and your butt gets cold. And you've got all these different surface temperatures around you, but the body itself feels 85. Right now, the temperature in here is 77 degrees. But if I'm sitting where David sits next to this window, my mean radiant temperature, the average temperatures of everything surrounding me, is not 77. In fact, you can be my house is a great example. My house is made of cinder blocks. Congratulations, Mr. Energy Guy. You have the least efficient house you can possibly have. So my house is cold all the time in the winter. And I can keep it at 77 degrees. I can keep it at 80 degrees. It's cold. It's just cold because the walls last night were probably 35, 40 degrees. Huge amount of heat loss. But it's not just heat loss to us. The way our bodies feel that is we radiate heat. Heat goes to cool. It's physics. Heat goes to cool. So we have to think about surfaces. And a lot of people will invest in really nice heating systems, but they won't necessarily invest in the shell and the envelope. And I can tell you about some very wealthy folks up in the mountains out of Evergreen. Doctor built a beautiful house, and they wanted to look out on at Mount Evans. So they built a wall of glass. And they could never, ever make it comfortable. I mean, physically, it was almost impossible to make that room comfortable there. And you guys, most of you are, you are certainly privy to the Carter administration, where we were doing a lot of add-ons to houses and atriums and the passive solar. We made a lot of solar ovens that were way too hot in the summer and they were way too cold in the winter. So passive house now and how we think about building, it's changed. Just like all things change, we learn. And so we don't build walls of glass anymore. Or if you do, expect that you're not going to be comfortable, or expect to spend a lot of money on glass that has a really high R value. But still, you can't get blood from a turnip. You cannot get glass that insulates like a wall. It's impossible. The best glass we can get out there, and I'm going off on a tangent, I'll get back to it. The best glass we can get out there right now is about R10, and it's very expensive. Code for walls right now is 25. So it's a third, basically, of what we're asking a wall to do. And if we make a wall at R10, you bet we're going to suffer some heat loss and whatnot. So just got to be smart about things. So there's this concept of mean radiant temperature. So this guy looks very comfortable, but his bum's probably pretty cold. But you know, you could be sitting on an ice cube in the desert, and you're probably not very comfortable, right? Even though the temperature around you is fine, there's surfaces that can really influence how you feel. And this happens a lot as well. Windows. And I got ahead of myself on windows, but windows are great. We love to look outside. But glass is glass is glass, and we can add 1 pane, 2 panes, we can fill it with argon, we can fill it with krypton, we can have 4 panes, we can have 5 panes. It's still glass, and we're still looking through it. It's still an opaque surface, right? And it's never going to be able to insulate like foam. Sorry, translucent surface. It's never going to insulate like foam. I mean, what is foam? It's just a bunch of bubbles. It's never going to insulate like cellulose, like fiberglass, like any insulation, like goose down. We're trapping air. That's what insulation does. And that's what we do with glass. But you can't trap air in even a 2-inch thick R10 window like you can in 10 inches of foam. Okay? Okay. So.
If I may interject.
Yeah, please.
Steve Stevens just told me that Alpen Windows here is now working on a 4-panel window. They prototyped it. Mm-hmm. And one of the surfaces is that Gorilla Glass. The type that is on all the smartphones these days.
So it's super thin.
Right, so super thin and still sturdy. So they're starting to do away with film. Yeah. And do glass instead. Because apparently what you said is true. You can't compare it to other insulating materials, but there's still room.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you thank you, Martin. Alpen is a company out of Boulder, and I've actually worked on the old owner's home in Boulder, a guy named Richard. In order to make glass more efficient, we have to add other compartments. What happens is, I won't get into the science too much. We have different compartments for air. The way Alpen gets around, when we add a triple pane window, windows are heavy. If we add another pane of glass, they're really heavy. If we have 4 panes of glass, you can barely lift the thing with 3 or 4 people. So the way that Alpen, this company's got around it and made really high performance windows, they've strung almost like a cellophane type film in between 2 pieces of glass, but they're basically making different chambers. But they've had a little bit of problem with the technology over time. So what Martin's saying is now they're going to use that really thin glass that they use on cell phones. And so that's kind of cool. And it's a good company. They make really nice stuff. They make the highest performing windows I know of. So comfort is more than just temperature, right? It also has to do with airflow. And so the Passive House Institute, which is kind of the most rigorous energy and comfort guidelines, it doesn't really say what to build with, but it says how to build. And their guidelines for personal comfort in this mean radiant temperature is you can't have a temperature difference more than 5 degrees on any surface. So even a window can't be, if you're trying to say 70, that window can't go below 65 or if it fails. The inside surface, that fails. This has to be within 5 degrees, this has to be within 5 degrees. You have to have airflow under a certain amount. Now in the summer it might be different. You might want some air blowing on you to make it feel cooler, but the other thing is humidity. You want humidity between 40 and 60%. That is the healthiest range for humidity. How many people can keep their home at 40 to 60% humidity here? Why? Why? Why not? And so, okay, dry, altitude. Air infiltration. It's air infiltration. It's air infiltration more than anything. So humidity holds heat, right? Water has what we call latent heat to it. And anytime, that's why steam has so much power to it versus like dry. You can hold your hand over the stove like an electric element and it's hot. But if you have a water in that pan and you hold it over, you blister your hand because there's a lot more energy in that steam. So you want your humidity at a certain level. 44% is great. Anything over 60%, you can kind of get some moisture, mildew. Too much moisture is a bad thing. Viruses, bacteria. And below can also be bad as well. Dust mites, other types of viruses, other types of bacteria. Why we can't keep our homes that high, we being the average people who own average homes, because we'd condense. You guys have noticed when it gets really cold outside, you sometimes get a little condensation on your windows. It's because your windows are cold. Notice that's the coldest surface in your house. You just proved it, because that was where it reached dew point. Because your humidity in your house, let's say it's 25%. Well, if that surface gets down to 30 degrees, even 25% humidity air will condense at that temperature. So you either need to replace your windows or you need to lower your humidity. So what we do in most homes is we lower the humidity. And in fact, this type of steam humidifier, so this is a bypass humidifier, very energy efficient as far as it doesn't use much energy, but it wastes a lot of water. Steam humidifiers, these are $800. These are about $2,000. They are amazing. They will keep your humidity wherever you want it to be, but they're expensive, not only up front, but operating costs. You're using electricity to boil water whenever you need to create humidity. But you can adjust the humidity now. As the temperature drops outside, your humidity level needs to drop in accordance, and every house is insulated differently. So every house has to have a different set point for humidity, because my poorly insulated house, the walls would sweat and get condensation on them if I had 20% humidity in the winter. Whereas Jim's well-insulated house, he might be able to keep his at 35. A passive house, that 40 to 60%, no problem. Because there's no cold surface. There's no surface cold enough that if you have humidity that high, even if it's minus 15 outside, nothing's at dew point on the inside. You can keep it whatever humidity you want to.
I prefer the console humidifiers because I don't like the idea of pushing wet air through my ductwork. Am I misled on that?
I don't mind. I like the console type too. I like to be able to control humidity in different rooms. I'm getting a steamer for my house, and I'm actually getting rid of my duct system. So I'm getting what's called a fan system. So it puts steam into the air at one point. Humidity moves crazy quickly. It's like 500 miles an hour. So it's like if I had steam here, it's equal humidity across this entire building in an instant. And so it doesn't really make a difference where it comes into the house. But this steam is in vapor form, and it never really condenses in your duct system. I mean, you don't want your ducts to be wet, right? But steam humidifiers are they're great, but I'll tell you, the leakier your house and the less efficient your house is, the less insulated it is, the more you have to keep pumping in, because you mentioned this, how tight your house is. So this is a picture of a blower door. Every building, every house has a certain amount of leakage. We want to build as tight as we possibly can. And I know some of you are screaming in the back of your head, but that'll make a sick building. And we'll discuss that in a minute. And we'll discuss why that's not necessarily the case. And that's going to be kind of at the end of the presentation. But it's dry outside right now, and it's cold. If you have a house, this is your house, and your house is really leaky. So here's your roof, and there's a gap there. Excuse me. I'm a little under the weather. If your house is very leaky, when air leaks out of your house, air's got to leak in. Same volume. This isn't a balloon. It doesn't change volume. So if you lose 100 cubic feet per minute, 100 cubic feet per minute of dry, cold air comes in. Now your heating system is going to heat that up, but it's going to be really low humidity. So you take low humidity air and you heat it, and the humidity level even drops. Warm air carries more humidity, right? So the leakier your house is, the more you're bringing in dry air that's cold, and the drier and drier and drier it gets. The tighter your home is, the less, and you slow this process down, so you're not bringing in cold, dry air as much. So making your house tight is very important. But if you make it tight, we have to make compensation for making it healthy. And that's the right way to do it. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Any questions on that? David?
Yes, is there a device that if you do have, like in Jim's house and in mine, we have a piano, we have to keep that level. How do I measure, but...
Yeah, buy a hygrometer. You can buy electronic hygrometers. You can buy a little silly little one that's $10 on Amazon. Yeah, they're very inexpensive. I've worked on some folks' homes where they have Steinways. Those folks spend money on humidity, because if they don't, they're going to lose $500,000. Because if you keep a Steinway at 10% humidity, it'll kill it. It'll kill it. And so you have people with really high-end artwork or floors, or maybe people who just really, really care about their health. And they want, or guitars, or whatever it is. Yeah, so Colorado's brutal because we build like the rest of the nation builds, and we're getting better, and code is getting much better, but the tighter the house, the more humid the house. So it's not just adding humidity. But these steamers, if you have a leaky house, I added one of these over in Greenwood Village on a home. The guy's electric bill went from like $50 to $150 a month. He was not happy. It was one of my sales guy that sold him that, because I told my sales guys, you can't be selling this stuff if you don't understand, and you got to be upfront. He doesn't work for me anymore. But like literally, this guy was spending $100 extra in electricity every month to keep his house at a moderate level of humidity. He wasn't trying to get to 50%. Okay, so just be forewarned.
A quick question about floors. How much are floors affected by humidity? Hardwood floors?
That's a good question. So I find it more often with evaporative cooling, and we'll talk about that. I don't know. I haven't actually seen that. Colorado's relatively dry in general, even in the summer, but we do have a pretty big range, and the inside can be very different from the outside as long as the wood was seasoned properly and was dried when it was put in, so it didn't shrink as it dried. I haven't seen many problems. I have seen people buckle their floors because they're not using their evaporative coolers properly, but I haven't seen people that have problems if they use them right. So, but a good question, and I don't know. I'll tell you what hardwood floor guys will tell you. You have to keep it at this level, but that's not in my experience, okay? Okay, so we're gonna start with some heating things. So, wood. I love wood. Wood's a great way to heat. It's carbon neutral. When a tree falls in the forest, I don't know if anyone hears it, but I can tell you the amount of carbon in that tree is gonna slowly go back into the earth. Or if I take that tree and chop it up and I burn it, that carbon's quickly going to go into the atmosphere. But it's carbon neutral. That carbon is stored in that tree. So unlike natural gas, coal, propane, electricity for the most part, depending on where the source is, and that's going to be the big takeaway at the end of this, is where your electricity comes from. But carbon neutral fuel, it's great. You got to make sure it's dry. I heated with wood in my Denver home for years, and if I ever had a wet piece of wood, my neighbors would complain because it would be really smoky. But if it was nice and dry, it would burn hot and it would burn very cleanly. The Norwegian countries, they heat with wood a lot. They have wood-fired boilers. This is actually a picture of a house in Munich. I had the privilege of going to Darmstadt, Germany, which is where the Passive House the whole thing started. Well, it didn't. Anyway, the Passive House Institute International is in Darmstadt, Germany. So I went, one of my friends that I used to build with lives right south of Darmstadt. He knows this guy who is the lead, I don't know, lobbyist for Mercedes-Benz and the German auto making thing. Beautiful house. Probably 3,000 square foot, huge by German standards. This is how he heats it. One wood stove, 3,000 square foot house. Comfortable house. Super insulated, super amazing windows, airtight. But he has one stove, and this creates about as much ash as you could fit in a bag in the entire season. He puts a log on, heats it for a few days, turns to ash. It's so hot, burns so well. You can also burn pellets. So you can also heat water with this. I had another client in Steamboat, and his house was a mess from a building science perspective, and they had to move out. One of their daughters, his daughter, actually wasn't growing properly. She was really short. And they called me because they had ice damming. Like when you went into their house, you were like, oh my God, am I gonna make it or not? So honey, don't move, don't shake anything, and you'd make the run because there's a block of ice the size of a Volkswagen that was gonna come down on you. It was because they were losing a lot of heat through a bad roof. And so we ended up working on this house quite a lot, but they heated with a wood-fired boiler. So they had in-floor heat, but they went through 11 cords of wood a year. After we were done, 3. I feel pretty good about that, but he had lots of wood sitting outside of his house. But anyway, wood's a great thing, but it has a little bit of a bad rap. The brown cloud, I grew up here in the 70s, and you couldn't even see Denver some days when it was so bad. So if you do get a stove, we'll talk about this in a second, please get something that is airtight. This open fireplace that has open doors or doors that, like anytime you can touch the fire, when you don't have a door that seals, that's incompatible with modern homes, both from a carbon monoxide perspective. If you do heat with wood, be careful because it does create carbon monoxide, especially when that fire dies down and it starts to smolder at the end. So beware to have a low-level carbon monoxide meter, not just the meter that you get at Home Depot, but a low-level meter. They're about $200, so it's 4 times as expensive. But I cannot tell you the number of times when I've been heating with wood for maybe 5 years of my life that thing went off. And it was an unsafe level of carbon monoxide. My regular meters didn't say anything, but this one was telling me, you got a problem. In fact, I was just at Don Cameron. Does anyone know Don Cameron? Just at his house a couple days ago. We're looking at doing a mini split system. He has a furnace with a cracked heat exchanger, and he's living with 3-4 parts per million carbon monoxide in his house. Not okay. It's not okay. But wood, you got to be careful. Open fireplaces, they're great for camping. They're great for ambiance. If you have one, fine. Just try to seal it. They actually make chimney top dampers now. This little damper thing where you pull the metal bar, you turn that thing, they're not airtight, as you know. It's a door, and it's a door to a long, tall shaft, which is made to draft. This will pull $300, $400, $500 of air out of your house a year, even if you never use it, even with the damper closed. Unbelievable. So in England, where everyone used to heat with wood, or coal, they created what's called a chimney balloon. So it's this little thing that you stick up there and you blow it up and you close it, and so it seals it. Perfect. We have these weird flues, and it's hard to get a balloon up there, and it's a mess. You come out looking like the guy from the Chimney song in Mary Poppins. So you want a chimney top damper. They make pop-top dampers and whatnot that actually seal, in which case that's a closed door now. I want the door to be closed. If you see light around your door, you know it needs to be weather stripped. But you can feel it coming in. This, you never feel it because air is always leaving. It's hard to feel air leaving your hand, but you feel it when it's coming at your hand. So this is why they created these chairs with the high back wing chairs, came out of England, because they'd face the fireplace where all the warmth would radiate towards them and all the cold air that was rushing and cooling the rest of the house down to go up the flue, they wouldn't feel it because they'd be facing the other way. A fireplace that's open will cool your house. It will warm the room you're in, but it will cool your house. Measurable. The bedrooms will cool because it's drawing air in. It's pulling air through your house. Airtight houses, it's incompatible. It's not a good idea. Okay? Questions? Yes, sir.
Does a gas fireplace have an outside
should. Yeah, most of them do.
Code requires
Not always. On some of the older ones. On the new ones, yes.
like 95.
Yeah, it probably would. I have a beef with gas fireplaces, and it's not with the gas fireplace, it's how they're installed. They're not airtight in how they're installed, and they could be, but the installers just don't know, and the code guys just don't know yet. And so when I do blower door tests and whatnot, I find that oftentimes rooms with gas fireplaces are very cold. And it's not because it's not insulated right. It might be because it's over a crawl space that's open to the environment and shouldn't be. But more often than not, it's leaks. Air's just being drawn through the house, and that's the biggest leak point. And it's sealed. It's a sealed front. It's a closed combustion fireplace. It's leaking around it, and it's leaking up around the flue. So that's right. That's right. But there is typically exhaust and combustion air separately piped. But they can end them, they can end the combustion air pipe in the middle of the flue, which also drives me crazy because they can leave it open to the top. They put a cap on it, which allows air in, but they should both be up to the top and sealed at the top. And it should be sealed at the flue collar, which is where those two pipes go through.
I remember once I bought a freestanding gas stove, and it had a double walled. The pipe that went up through the ceiling was double walled, and the outer half inch was for the intake air coming down.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so it was totally sealed.
Yeah. But then the question is, did they seal that? So even though that itself was sealed, where that pipe ran, did they seal that chase? And that's what doesn't get sealed. And that's the big flaw, that's the big leak to the outside.
It was exposed in my living room.
Oh, then that's perfect. Yeah. Then that's perfect. You had a question?
The house that heated with just one fireplace?
Yeah.
How did the heat get into the bathrooms and the bedrooms and?
I'll show you later. It's called an energy recovery ventilator. But how tight houses need, so we have an adage, and I've been saying this for 20 years. If you build tight, you got to ventilate right. That's always been the saying. Build tight, ventilate right. How do you ventilate? There's lots of different ways to ventilate. But if you get homes that are substantially airtight and well insulated, you can have one fan that exhausts the bathrooms, the kitchen, the areas where you want exhaust, crawl space, and you can have fresh air going into the bedrooms and the living room, and they all, instead of just pulling this air out of your house and pulling air in from the outside that's cold, it goes across a heat exchanger. And I've got a slide later. If that runs continually, because you're constantly bringing in a little bit of fresh air, that's the best practice, is to constantly, we're creating pollutants right now. I'm talking a lot. I'm creating pollutants. And we are creating pollutants. There's did I do a ventilation system for you here? No. We had trouble. It was really tight here, and the retrofits are sometimes difficult. But if you're building new, and code's going to require this, you need to build with it some sort of heat recovery, energy recovery, heat recovery ventilator, and those will distribute throughout the house.
Okay.
So, good question. Yes, ma'am.
You said for the open fireplace, you need a cap on the roof?
Yeah.
Do you not need that for the stove?
Not when it's.
Not
No,
for the stove.
this is the cap. This is the airtight, sorry, Jim's TV. This is the airtight layer. So this box is completely isolated and airtight. Some building scientists still say that you should never have even a closed combustion appliance because it requires air. Even if you pipe air into that, it's still incompatible with very tight homes. And I don't know enough yet to have an opinion on that, but I still like wood, maybe just because I grew up in Colorado. So in this case, whenever you're building, you have to say, this on this side of this is outside, and on this side is inside. It's called the thermal boundary. It stops air, stops heat. It's usually insulation and Tyvek or something. So if you've got a pipe going through that, you've got a hole in that thermal boundary. So then you need to say, you still need to define that thermal boundary somewhere. Where am I stopping air? In this case here, In this case, up top. You can't just have it open somewhere, okay? All right, I'm gonna talk too long, and I want to go quicker. Coal we won't talk about. If you have one of those in your basement that look like that, those octopuses covered with asbestos, don't call me. So, electric, baseboard, the 1970s. I saw you cringe. Yeah, too expensive. I mean, we all associate these electric baseboards with my house. I lived in Steamboat for a while. It was really expensive because it's just electricity, man. And it's not, this is electric, but this is leveraging electricity to move heat from an existing source. If you're just burning electrons, it might as well be a toaster. This is as efficient as a toaster, right? 1 watt of power is about 3 BTUs. 10 watts of power, it's about 30 BTUs. 100 watts of power, you get the idea, right? So that's what resistive heating is. But I will tell you, I don't have a problem with resistive heating if your loads are really low. We'll get to that in a little bit, okay? Classic 70s house. I couldn't pass up that picture. Okay, this is what, how many people have natural gas or propane? Almost everyone. Almost everyone. I do. At the end of this year, I won't. I'm switching. I'm fuel switching, but I'll tell you why. Okay, but first let's talk about this. There's propane and there's natural gas. This is what we've had for the past, we've had it forever. Propane and natural gas burn very hot, and we put them through these, either a boiler, they can be delivered in many different ways. If you do have a furnace or you're upgrading a furnace, please get what's called closed combustion, where it's a AFUE is annual fuel utilization efficiency. So you guys have heard 70% efficient furnaces, 80% efficient furnaces. The new furnaces are 97, 98. You can't get past 100%. There is no such thing as perfect combustion, but you can get close. And we've got the technology right now. We can get 98%. We can squeeze 98% out of that juice out.
But isn't that a $15,000 furnace as opposed to a $5,000 furnace?
No, no, it's not that much different. I think a lot of HVAC companies will say low, medium, high, or low, high. Here's your 80% like you have now, we'll replace it, and it's $5,000. And this new one is $15,000. You know why? The difference in cost of those might be $300, $400. They can do this one so quick. Take it out, put the new one in, see ya, you guys go to the next job. This one, I gotta drill new holes, it takes a little bit more in labor. It might be $1,000, really, when it comes down to it. The takeaway from that, get multiple bids. Always get multiple bids, because a lot of HVAC companies don't have your best interests in mind, or they don't know. They don't know the technology, or honestly, in my experience, and this is gonna sound a little prejudiced, I find a lot of people in construction and in HVAC in particular are more worried about how big their ATV is than about if they can afford an electric vehicle. And there's nothing wrong with ATVs, but there's just not much of an environmental consciousness there with a lot of people. And there are companies that make a lot of money swapping out equipment that I don't even think should be legal anymore. So this is all you should install if you're going to upgrade to a furnace. And, you know, hot water heater too, here's a tankless. But I'm going to tell you my opinion, and my opinion is to go with electric. And it might even be baseboard. But not always. It doesn't always fit. If you do have propane natural gas like I do, like this system that I installed, and I'm okay with these systems. This is a huge house. I can't get these systems more than about 50,000 BTUs. So I have to put in multiple mini-split type systems to meet a big home's needs. Well, then that gets expensive. Or, well, there's other ways to do it. I can say I'm not using that room much, so maybe we'll just put a baseboard in there. It's not used, who cares? We don't need to keep it warm. But a 3, 4, 5,000 square foot home that's built to modern standards, the load's not over 50,000. It's less than that. And I'll show you an example of that at the end too. If you do have a furnace, if you do have forced air, get good filtration. Filtration's key. They make big filters now, like the 4 or 5-inch media filters you've started to see at Home Depot. That's what you want. Say no to the 1-inch filters, say no to the even 2-inch filters, and say no to all the little add-ons, the little, oh, it's this UV light, or it's this catalytic thing, or this, this ozone creating thing. It's all gimmicks. There's no proof about any of that stuff. Humidifier is totally different. Humidifier is totally different. You missed the first part of the presentation.
What kind of filter did you say?
It's called a media filter.
Media.
Yeah, you need a media filter.
What about electronic air filters?
No. No. No electronic air filters. Media only.
So does media filter replace your basic 1-inch?
Yes. Replaces it completely.
Instead of having a little fabric, it's got actual granules.
No, it's got fabric. It's just 5 inches thick, which does a couple things. The best filter in the world is a piece of plywood. Man, it filters everything, including all the air. The worst filter in the world, oh, but it's so good on airflow, it's no filter. It's great for airflow, super efficient, super quiet. But there's balance, right? Plywood's no good, no filter's no good, so you want a balance in between those two. So they have what's called MERV value. So MERV is a level of filtration. You want between 8 and 16. It's a range. It depends on your furnace, how much it can actually push. The nice thing about these big filters is there's so much surface area that you can still move air quite freely, but the pores can be so small that it's really trapping small, tiny, micron-sized, smoke's hard, but really small viruses and bacteria and things like that. And the new furnaces, where we have these variable speed options with these new fans, we can say, you know what, if I need humidity and my humidifier is connected to this, if I want filtration, someone was asking about distribution earlier, you were asking about that. How do I get the heat from here to here? Margaret's house. Margaret's house, I installed a system like this. Well, we only installed a single head. And I said, it's going to heat and cool this area, but you're probably not going to get it back in your back bedroom. So what she's been doing is she's been running her modern furnace, and I think it helps, but it's still not doing it, which has been my experience. But you run these fans not on full blast, but on 20%, 30%. You don't even hear it, but you're only filtering if you're moving air, and you're only moving and destratifying air around your house if you've got a fan on. So.
Can you retrofit variable speed?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, they make variable speed fans. It gets, as all things that I'm going to talk about, there's a lot more behind it, and I have to rein myself back a little bit. A very highly efficient fan is not a highly efficient fan if it's connected to a poor duct system. And so you get these variable speed fans that are quite efficient, but you put them in a restrictive duct system, and all of a sudden this fan that you thought was going to save you all this money costs you more money. So ducts are very important too, and so there's this whole thing about sizing. Also, anytime you get a new furnace, any heating system, make sure they size it properly. Why would you install these big, huge things if you don't need that? Or certainly, even worse, why would you install a tiny heater that only puts out 10,000 BTUs if your house needs 50? You're going to be cold most of the time. But if your house needs 50 and you install a heater that's 100, what happens is it short cycles. And what happens is this thing turns on, 100,000 BTUs of heat. Oh, thermostat, I'm done, you're fine, slow down, stop. Shuts off. So temperature drops. Thing turns on again, and you get this like hot, cold. Variable speed in modulating furnaces, modulating technology, comes up to temperature, just kind of stays there. It's like the difference between Jackrabbit start, stop traffic and just going 65 down the highway all day. Your mileage is going to be much better. So make sure your contractor sizes the system properly. That's very important. And I'll tell you, mini splits in particular, the bigger the mini split, the cost goes up a lot. On furnaces, my difference between a 40,000 BTU furnace and a 120,000 BTU furnace is a few $100s. On these, it might be $4,000. So get the size right, okay? All right, I feel like I'm getting some nodders, so I'm gonna go a little faster. Modes of heat transfer, we talked, there's conduction, there's convection, there's radiation. Radiation is really the most important one. That's how our bodies feel the most heat. And we heat all our houses with conduction, with air movement in this country, and it's a little crazy. So,
what did we just see there?
oh, so there's a furnace, and this is a floor, this is a forced air furnace and a register.
Okay.
This is to represent how all of us have heat in our house for the most part.
I've never seen it in action.
Oh yeah, that's just called an in-shot burner. That's a typical burner. I brought this picture, but I actually have one right here, which is blowing some nice heat. Notice how quiet these are? Yeah. You can't even hear them. So unlike a furnace, like this is putting out heat right now, and these are imminently controllable. You're all being watched right now by that little eye, if you see that. That's actually scanning the room, and it's saying the hot points and the cold points, and wherever there's cold, depending on how it's set here, it'll actually say, I'm going to blow warm air to the cold points. Or if you say, I don't want you to do that. I don't want that. Especially in the colds. I don't want cold air blowing on me. You say, I don't want it. And so where it sees you, it will not blow air on you. They're pretty fancy. But I'm not trying to sell these in particular, but this is an example of convective air movement heating system, but a totally different style. And then you guys have seen radiant. So we can have in-floor radiant. This is a home in Golden. I did a few mini splits for, but a mini split's great for a nice big open area. What about a bathroom? I'm gonna put a $2,000 mini split head in a bathroom that's 100 square feet? That's crazy. Guess what that is? Electric radiant. It's a warm floor. Everyone loves a warm floor in their bathroom. Don't be afraid of using a little bit of electricity. Electricity is as green as the grid. And electricity used to be so dirty. And we're still stuck in that mindset, and it's just not that dirty anymore. Yes, it's still bad. But the carbon footprint of electricity is now on par with the carbon footprint of gas. Used to be way higher. So we all were like, use gas, use gas, use gas. Guess what? If I burn gas, no matter if it's 100% efficient or not, it's the same carbon footprint every time. As Excel says, hey, it's cheaper for me to put solar panels and windmills in. This carbon footprint drops and drops and drops, and if you're like Jim, and probably some of you others who have solar, the carbon footprint is way low on electricity, right? So electricity is not a bad thing. I used to feel really guilty about starting my dryer. I have kids, I do so much laundry, and I used to hang out on the laundry line all the time. But today, before I came here, I'm trying to do laundry, and I'm like, I'm not feeling guilty about this. I got solar. And I press it. And it's good, and electricity is good. It's our friend, and it's not something to stay away from heating anymore. In fact, it's what we should be going back to.
Which types of floors can you work with that?
With this? So it has to be kind of, the harder the surface, the better, like a mass floor. So tile, hardwood's okay, but hardwood has a little bit of insulation value to it. But you don't want to put a carpet pad over that and then carpet, because you're insulating your heat source away from you, right? So it can be hot water heat. It can be hot, this is electric. It can be hot water. It doesn't need to be in the floor. It can be in a wall. That's comfortable. The Europeans do a lot of this. You can see in these images, here and here and here and here. What do you see? It's cold. It's radiant cooling. They have water pipes running through their ceiling with chilled water, and it drops down on you, and it feels so comfortable and cold. There's no movement of air. Whereas these have a little bit of movement of air, but they're not like an air conditioner, even though they're an air conditioner. It's a different type. So radiant again, is that really comfortable. By the way, I brought an infrared camera. So if any of you want to play with it. So this takes these images like this. Dark is colder, red is hotter. So they're super, super sensitive. I'm just going to take a quick picture here. So you can see the red, and then there's a scale here. So right in the middle is what that temperature is reading. So the hottest pixel and the coldest pixel. But this is how one of the tools you use when you're building your home to find out, do you have cold temperatures surrounding you? Why is this room uncomfortable? I'm going to hand this around. So you can cancel by, there's a trigger here, but you can focus it with this thing here, and you just play with it and it'll make a clear image. And then you can snap a picture if you want by hitting that, and then you can cancel it again by hitting it. This is about $6,000. $5,000 of it is right there. It's that lens. It's called germanium. It's a single element. It's like diamond. So the rest of it, don't care. Don't touch that.
But there's also $200 iPhone
Yeah.
adapter.
Yeah, and you know what, Martin? You're absolutely right. They work fantastic. In fact, my Google phone doesn't support it, but I have a FLIR One that I used to use on my phone. So you can get a $200 attachment for your phone. You got one right there, and that's a Seek, isn't it? Is that a Seek or a FLIR One? That's a Seek. They work fantastic. They work great. This is obsolete. I only use this now because it's fun, but those that attach to your phone work great. Now,
How much are they?
$200.
What do you call them?
There's FLIR and there's Seek. FLIR, it's called the FLIR One, and they sell them in both Android and iPhone applications. And the other one is Seek, S-E-E-K. Now, when you are dealing with infrared, be careful, because I'm trained, right? So I have been through weeks of training on infrared thermography, and I see things that other people will say, oh my God, look at that. I'm like, it's nothing. You will see things that aren't there. In fact, a lot of people see ghosts. If you look at yourself in a window, it'll reflect back at you. Different surfaces reflect differently. And not everything that looks hot is hot, and not everything that looks cold is cold. So you just have to be careful with it, but it can be a good tool in a broad sense. Okay? All right, let's get to cooling. So we talked all about heating so far. Wood, propane, natural gas, different forms of electricity, and I'll talk about heat pumps at the end. So the most efficient way of cooling, open a window, dummies. Let your house vent out. When I grew up here, we used to get away with that really well. And we had whole house fans, and they worked fine. There are a couple, maybe a week in the year where it was really hot. My house now, if I didn't have an active cooling system, my kids would be dead. They would be cooked. They'd have little turkeys upstairs because it just gets too damn hot now. And not every summer's like this, but some summers, it's just hot. I mean, we'll have a week or two where it won't get below 85 at night. That didn't happen 40 years ago, but it does now.
And it's the night temperature.
And it's the night temperatures. So the idea behind, so windows work great. Fans, big fan, no pun intended, even though it worked. A fan will make, if it's 70 degrees in here and you have a fan on, that convective breeze will make you feel about 5 degrees cooler. Perfect. Use them. They're relatively low energy. The reason why we like fans for cooling is, especially at night when you're using a whole house fan. Now, I'm not a proponent, I'm not a fan of this type of whole house fan because they're loud, they don't seal very well. You want to invest in something like an Airscape or a Tamarack, which are brands that actually have louvered doors. However, I would stay away from whole house fans completely now. I still install them sometimes to augment people with air conditioning, because I might be able to reduce their air conditioning by about 50% with a whole house fan. And the whole house fan is only as good as the outside temperature, right? You don't turn it on when it's 95 degrees and expect to be cold. You're just heating your house up. When you turn it on is at night when the temperature's cooler outside. And you draw cool air in, and you're not trying to make yourself feel cold by the airflow. What you're really doing is you're taking the temperature away from the materials in the house, from the granite, from the wood, from the drywall, from the ceilings. And if you can charge all of this, like on a cool day, if everything's 60 degrees in here, you're going to be cold. On a warm day, oh, that's glorious. So you're trying to get all these surfaces around you to be 60 degrees. And with the whole house fan, you can get within, again, my experience, within about 5 degrees of the low temperature at night. So if it gets to 60 at night, you can get your house to 65. And then in the morning, you shut it up, turn the fan off, and you can coast. And it'll block the sun, You let it go, and then your air conditioner doesn't come on until 1 o'clock instead of 10. You just saved 3 hours of 30 amp 240 volt current. That adds up, okay? What my personal preference is, and this is, again, if you got great shade in your house, I have some people who, this is fine for their house. I'm a big fan of evaporative coolers. It is a whole house fan. It's just instead of pulling air out through open windows, it's pushing air out through open windows, right? You don't have to have the water function on, but if you need the water function, you can turn it on. And in our climate, even at 100 degrees, we talked about relative humidity. Like if I'm in Louisiana and I got 80% humidity, it's still 100 degrees. If I'm in Texas, it doesn't work. Arizona works great. Here, 95% of the time it works great. I keep my house cold, like 70 degrees in the summer. Like people come in and they're like cold. We'll be sitting out on the porch and we'll open windows so the air comes out onto the porch. Why I feel okay with that? This costs about $5 of electricity a month to run. Super energy efficient, much more than even a mini split system or the most expensive. Why? There's compressors involved with these. Anytime you're talking about mechanical cooling, you're talking about big pumps that use a lot of electricity. This doesn't have a big pump. It has a little water pump to move water over a pad, and it's got a fan. Those are efficient motors. We're not talking about compressing a gas to 600 pounds per square inch, right? So even, and these are high-end coolers, they're very nice. They don't smell the swampiness. I hate that term, swamp coolers, but I get where it comes from, because you go into a house like that and it sounds like you're on an airboat in the swamp and it smells like you're there too, right? New coolers are extremely quiet. There's a great rebate from Excel. They're not for everyone. You have to have your windows open. Some people do not like that. If you don't like that, you need a system like this, or you need some other sort of system. But for me, if it's between a whole house fan and this, if I have AC, I might get a whole house fan to reduce my AC use. But if I don't have either, I'm going to install this because I get the best of both worlds. And neither are cheap. A good whole house fan is $3,000, maybe 35, depending on the size or more. A good evaporative cooler like this, I'm installing one which is, I don't very often this time of year, but one of my clients is hiking the entire Rocky Mountain Continental Divide Trail from Mexico to Canada, starting in a month, and he wants a system on his rental property before he starts. So I'm putting one in this next week, but they're $6,000, $7,000. They're not cheap units, and you can buy cheaper units, but this kind is just really quiet. And my opinion is, I'll get you in just a second, Steve, if you're gonna spend money on your home, in Europe, they spend 10, 15, 20% on mechanical systems all the time. And their homes are incredibly energy efficient for the most part, and they're very comfortable, and their contractors are well trained because they've been to school, they know this stuff. Here, we beat them down. No, 5%'s too much. I need to get my mechanical budget to 3. That's like telling your heart surgeon, no, don't do the best surgery. The mechanical system's the heart of your home. Spend some money on it. Your home's worth $500,000 or more easily in this market. Spend $5,000 and get a better furnace than the $3,000 one, right? And get a contractor who really gets it and understands what they're doing. Hold on, Steve had his hand raised first.
What are some of the brands of those higher efficient ones?
I really like Breeze Air. I think they're the best on the market. They're not the most efficient on the market. There is a company called Colorado, but they're not really as appropriate for residential, sorry. They're both owned by the same company now, so I can say that because I'm schlepping one of their products. But Breeze Air is good. AeroCool and ProCool both make decent ones. They have a new model with a variable speed fan, but Breeze Air is still the top in my book for a number of reasons.
In terms of spending too little on mechanical systems,
Yeah.
people always spend too much on the bloody granite
Yeah,
countertops.
people don't think a thing about doing a
it's way out of
$50,000
proportion.
kitchen remodel, but as soon as you say, I've got a $15,000 heating and cooling, oh, that's crazy. I can get a heating and cooling system for $7,000. Fine, if I can't convince you, do it, but you're gonna pay for it. and your wife's not going to be happy, and eventually my system's going to save you more than that anyway. So.
And people order out anyway, so
Yeah.
why bother with the kitchen?
If you're, what did you say, Martin? What did you say?
They get takeout.
Okay, I got 5 minutes left before my hour's up. Did you have a
Could you
question?
repeat your percentage of your budget that you said the mechanical system should be?
In
In like new construction?
so in new construction, typically the mechanical systems are about 5%. I think they should be double that. And in order to do it right, if you're doing a tight home, you're gonna have an energy recovery ventilator, and you're gonna have high-end systems, and you're gonna spend that much anyway. But 10-15% is not too much to spend on a good mechanical system. I mean, you get what you pay for. Everything: boots, cars, clothes, vacations, wives. Wait a minute, not wives. I'm joking. This is a good area for evaporative cooling right here. The rest of the United States, forget about it. Okay, so finally, heat pumps. What's a heat pump? It's something that pumps heat from one place to another. It's cold outside, but there's still heat out there. So we can capture heat, and we can concentrate it, and we can pump it in here. So I'm feeling heat right now, and we do that with a refrigerant. So your refrigerator, it's a heat pump. It's taking heat out of the air in your refrigerator, and you put your hand behind your refrigerator, it's hot. It's moving heat from the inside to the outside. Air conditioner, traditional air conditioner, it's a heat pump. It's taking heat out of your house, putting it in refrigerant, and it's pumping it outside. A geothermal system, it's taking heat from the air, from the ground, excuse me, and it's pumping it into your house. And you can deliver it in radiance, or you can deliver it in air. There's lots of different ways to do it. And the nice thing about geothermal is you can take heat out of your house and put it into the ground in the summer. Geothermal tends to be very expensive though. And everyone says, but geothermal is the most efficient. It is. It's the most efficient. But it's also the most expensive. And I will tell you that these types of systems aren't much less efficient. But I'm still a huge proponent of geothermal because you're not creating heat. You're just concentrating an existing source of heat. And what's the existing source? Well, it's the sun. Sun for everything. But it's either in the soil or it's in the air. And so we're just moving heat from one place to another. Just like this system, it both heats and cools. An air conditioner, if you have a traditional furnace with an air conditioner and it's time to upgrade and you want to keep your furnace, fine, keep your furnace. Put a heat pump air conditioner on instead of just an air conditioner. Don't heat Jim Smith's house. Jim, tell us about your heat pump.
I have what's that brand?
I think you have a Carrier.
Carrier. I have a Carrier hybrid system where instead of having a traditional air conditioning compressor outside the house, it's a heat pump. And so when it's cold, when I'm in heating mode, it's running. My neighbors must think, why is this air conditioner running in the winter? Well, what it's doing actually is it is taking heat out of the air and putting it into the coil. The way the typical furnace is, you have a fire chamber, and then above it you have this thing which has got the cold fluid going through when you're in air conditioning mode, and the furnace is off, and it's just using the same ductwork to blow air across these cold coils, right? Well, in the winter, those coils are hot when you have a heat pump because they're hot from the heat that was brought in from that compressor from outdoors. And my gas flame only runs when it's below about 20 or 30 degrees because that one's only efficient down to about freezing in terms of being able to extract heat out of the air. This one for this, it's been very cold this past week, but even when it was 0 degrees outside, these things were pumping heat. And they were getting that heat from outdoors.
That's right.
Because there was heat in the air.
270 degrees above absolute zero. You still have 270 degrees. Right?
So I was amazed.
So thank you, Jim. Heat pumps, we shouldn't be allowed to sell air conditioners anymore. What differentiates a heat pump from an air conditioner is a little valve that allows the refrigerant to reverse. So instead of heat going this way, it allows heat to go this way. They're no more expensive. We should install them every time we install air conditioners. We should install heat pumps because we should be switching to electricity, in the shoulder seasons in particular. Now, why you probably haven't heard about this as much is because the technology wasn't there. 10 years ago, the compressor technology it worked great in Texas, but it didn't work in Colorado in cold climates. You didn't have the efficiency. The compressor had to work so darn hard to extract heat from 0-degree temperature that it would use as much electricity as just a toaster. Why not have 20 toasters? So the technology's gotten so much better recently, and it continues to get better, that on average now, this one probably has, it depends on the temperature outside, but the average coefficient of performance, which is how much heat it puts out compared to just electric resistance, is about 300%. So it's about 300%, 3 times as efficient as just a resistance heater, right? So heat pumps are great. This is a heat pump water heater. I just installed one of these 2 days ago. Martin, I installed a heat pump water heater at your house. How does it work? What does it do? Takes heat. Where does it get its heat from?
From the surrounding air.
Yeah.
And actually, it's positioned right next to the furnace. So
Yeah.
all the wasted heat from the furnace is being sucked up
And put into your hot water to make hot water. And now you can duct these too. So the one that I just installed the new Rheem, super sweet, super nice heat pump water heaters. And so if it's in a big mechanical room, who cares if it's a little cool, because usually your furnace is in there anyway. But if you're getting to a really efficient home and you don't want to cool down the area where the heat pump is, duct it. Duct it to the outside. So take your heat out of the outside if you want to. So you can basically, this gentleman ducted this one. So instead of cooling it down, he's got a solar thermal system too. But instead of it taking heat out of his environment and then cooling the environment down so it puts the heat in the water, he's taking the cool and he's putting it outside in the winter. In the summer, it's just free cooling. It's just a small air conditioner, but it makes heat.
My hybrid carrier system at home is 6 years old. And as I say, it only will produce heat from the outside air when it's down to about 20 or 30, so I have to have that gas furnace when it's super cold. But that was 6 years ago. Could I now have a totally ducted heat pump system?
Yeah. Good question. You guys get the question. It depends on the loads of the house. So we design homes. When I say this home has needs 100,000 BTUs to heat it, that's on a design day of cold. That means it's 0. So I design my system for 100,000 BTUs for when it's 0. How often is it 0? About a week a year. About 98% of the time, we're not even close to that design temperature, but that's what we design our systems for. So you have backup gas for when it gets that cold. The new systems, this system, for example, here, it will produce 100% of its rated power down to 5 degrees, and it'll produce all the way down to -13 it's called a hyperheat unit, but all the way down to -13, it'll give 70% of its heat. But that's when you need the heat the most, when it's really cold. So what do? You have a backup source of heat, whether it's natural gas, propane, or electric.
Space heater.
Well, not even space heater, but resistance heater in your furnace. So I just redid a house that is all solar. The guy had a solar thermal system from the Carter administration. It leaked for the 5th time. He's like, I'm done. We're taking this thing out. So we gutted his system and we put in a heat pump. But we put in a relatively small heat pump because he has so much solar, just like Jim, on this place, he could afford to use a little bit more electricity. So no natural gas. So we put some electric heating elements in there. We can control them. We can say when it gets to 5 degrees, then you kick on. Or if you're paying more for electricity or less, maybe you want it to kick on at 20 degrees. Or maybe you don't want it to kick on at all. So you can use an electric furnace. Crazy, right? even me, like I'm the energy guy, and like a year ago, I wasn't doing this stuff. I wasn't even thinking about heat pumps like I do now. I did them, but now it's like, holy cow, this is really the future because of the grid in the electricity is only as green. The carbon footprint of your electricity is only as big as the source. And so if you're getting everything from a coal-fired power plant, then that's bad. But even Excel Energy, in all their corporate ways, they're going to be what percentage by 2026? They're going to be like 50% renewable. They're shooting for 100% renewable within 30 years. Electricity is the future when it comes to our entire economy, when it comes to our homes, but also our cars, everything. We're all going to be using electricity, and that's just the way it is because it's cheaper and it's cleaner. So we get both. Steve?
Two things. Is
Yeah.
there some kind of efficiency rating for these?
Of course.
And what is that called? And what? Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, if you need to go, I'm sorry. I've been talking for an hour, so feel free to go. I'm getting pretty close. Let's talk about it at the end.
Okay.
Is that cool?
Sure.
I'll tell you about it.
The second thing I wanted to say, you were just talking about Excel.
Yeah.
I suppose everyone knows, but maybe not. It's now possible to sign up and have all of your
Yeah.
electricity come from solar.
Oh, yeah.
or Excel.
Well, or wind. I've been on wind source for 20 years. I've had 100% of my power come from wind. Now, does it really come from wind? No, it just comes from the grid.
No,
But
it's just accounting.
yeah, it's accounting. That's all it is. Thank you for that point. So you don't have to have solar to still be 100% renewable now. And that's why Excel's going this way. It's cheaper. They don't have to have a bunch of guys and gals at a coal-fired power plant hoping that it doesn't blow up and watching the steam pressure levels. They wash the panels. They have one guy out there with a squeaky squeegee every couple years. It's crazy. The stuff's robust. So this is actually Jim's roof here. So he has solar panels. Margaret, I told you. So this is the heat, this is the outside condensing unit. The solar up here. This is the system I installed at Margaret's house. I didn't even know she was going to be here tonight. And I'm actually working at Geos, which is a net zero energy community out in Arvada right now. So these are 6 LG heat pumps, and they have solar to run these. So each one of these is for a different unit. So each one of these has 3 heads just like this, but each one is on a different floor. And these are 24,000 BTU units for about 2,500 square feet. So they have a head on each floor, completely comfortable. But they're well built. So if I'm retrofitting and I go into a big house, I may not be able to do that. I might be able to say, Margaret's home, your home is relatively small, but we put in a system for Margaret's main living room, but it doesn't get back to her bedroom because it adds a couple grand every time you add another zone. Now I sized it big enough so that you probably have plenty of heat, but it's just not going to where you want it to go.
What's the life expectancy? Because they say the gas forced air furnaces have a 15-year life expectancy.
They go. Mini splits go. I mean,
They run and run.
Mitsubishi has a 10-year warranty, full warranty.
Well, you don't get that on a gas
You
fire.
don't get that on, you get it on the heat exchanger, but not on everything else. I've had 0 problems with these. They're complicated, and that's why I want to show you. So what's the best heating and cooling system? The one that's not used. The most efficient system you can get, it's the sun. But you want it to be low carbon because in reality, we live in Colorado. We have 6,000 heating degree days. I mean, it's a certain amount that we need to heat here. If you can't get it from the sun, you got to get it somewhere. So try to do low carbon, whatever it is. And even if it's gas or propane, I would never do propane. I'd always do electricity. But if it's natural gas, fine. But spend some money on making your house relatively efficient. So I want to show you something. So these are some homes that I've built. So these are net zero energy homes. This one's straw on that side. This is a foam SIPS remodel. These are all net zero homes. And I'm going to go quick again. Oh, shoot. Oh, hold on. This is going to freak out here in a second, I think. This is a little straw bale I built in Boulder about 15 years ago. Guess what electric heating and heating system I used? Baseboard. Super cheap. Why? Don't need it. Cheap, best, most efficient systems, the ones that are not used. I got R60 walls. I'm super airtight, and I'm passively cooled. I sited, I mean, it's a tiny house, but you can do the same thing. I'm building over my garage right now, 400 square feet, not big. Guess what my loads are? 2,000 BTUs. The smallest unit Mitsubishi makes is 6,000. I'm a third of that. I could heat it easily with I could heat it with a toaster, easily. But I'm not going to. You know why? Because cooling. I get cooling with this. And some people want cooling. And if it's 85 at night, you're going to be hot. And I'm not going to have that for people that are staying at my place. So electric is not bad. And by the way, this is baseboard. It's kind of sexy. This is the opposite of baseboard. This is called Cove. It's also electric. This is also electric. You see these in Europe all the time. Little electric heat warmers. Sometimes they're water, but more often than not, even Europe is starting to switch to heat pumps. And I saw it a lot in Germany and Austria. And they're cold. I mean, they have cold winters there. And they're starting to switch. They have beautiful mechanical systems. But they're switching from oil, they're switching from natural gas, they're even switching from wood, and they're going to solar, they're going to greening the grid, and they're going to electric of some kind. If you need cooling, heat pumps of any sort, whether it's a central heat pump like Jim has in his house, a split mini heat pump, or just a baseboard. I'm totally fine with baseboards. In fact, so my house in Golden, I use 3,000 kilowatt hours a year of electricity. I was curious what would happen if I went to 100% just resistance. So I went and bought like 10 oil-filled radiators, and I plugged them all in, and I put them on thermostats. And then I extrapolated. I would need to almost quadruple, 3.5 times what I use. But what you don't see when that happens is you don't see what happens to your gas. Your gas goes to zero. So Margaret, we were talking about this earlier. Do you want to say what you've discovered using heat pumps?
My electricity bill used to be $50 a month, and my gas $150 a month. Now it's totally flipped.
Yeah.
Electricity is $150 and gas is $50, because I'm running my furnace a lot less because I have the mini split, and also I have the on-demand hot water heater, so I'm not heating a big tank of water with gas. So
Right.
I really cut down, and I intentionally have upped my electricity usage because I want to go solar, and I want Excel to let me have as big a system as I can get, so I can go totally electric.
Yeah, sounds good. And we're all going to have electric cars at some point anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not a bad thing to have solar. But there are other ways. If you don't have rooftop, get Renewable Connect, get wind source, get community solar. There's lots of ways to do it. So I'm going to call it good there. We already talked about this. If it's tight, ventilate right. I am free. I'm happy to have conversations about any of this stuff. I work pretty locally. I try to work just Jefferson County pretty much. I get people calling me from all over the place, and I don't mind talking to someone on the phone and giving them advice. But I kind of work here. Sometimes I'll work a little bit in the mountains, but feel free to call me if you have questions on stuff, and I'll just help you. And if you want to consult and you actually want to sit down and talk for a while, I'll charge you a fee, and we can sit down and I'll tell you what I know. So anyway, I'll end with that. If anyone has questions.
You're still doing energy audits, right?
Yeah, I still do energy audits.
What's the net cost to the homeowner to do an energy audit?
$600.
$600?
$600. That's correct.
What does Excel give you?
$200. I charge $800 for an audit.
I thought it was much lower.
It is for other people. It's not for me. I charge more because I do more.
And it includes the blower door test.
Oh, of course. Yeah. No, I mean, with information's only as good as the person with the information. And it's only as valuable to you as the person. And I see so many audits that are $200, and these guys have been out of college for 2 years, and they have, I have studied this stuff my whole life. I have doctorate degrees in science, in building science stuff. I live and breathe this stuff, and I charge for it. And if you want the good information, you go with me. If not, go with someone else and then call me when they make a mistake. So I know it sounds a little egotistical, but that's just I've just seen that a lot. But I'm happy if someone else does an audit too, and I'll take their data and I'll make it my own and figure out what to do and how to help. I do all of this stuff myself. I'm the guy out there doing the work. I have a guy who's far too educated to be helping me, but he does. He's got his master's from mines, and he's my assistant. But I do all of it myself. I used to have 45 guys. Now it's just me and this other guy, because it's much easier to manage, and I don't have to worry about guys smoking pot and crashing my trucks and falling through ceilings because they're drunk. And it's so hard to get good people in this country. It's so crazy. I wish we had some sort of vocational apprentice type program, but we don't, and it is what it is. So anyway, if you have questions, let's let everyone get out of here, but feel free to give me a call.